I'm Gordon Bonnyman. I'm a lawyer. We're in Nashville, Tennessee, in the offices of something called the Tennessee Justice Center, which is a small public interest tax-exempt law firm that represents poor people throughout Tennessee's 95 counties. I worked for legal aid for 23 years, and then in 1996 Congress prohibited federally funded legal aid, legal services programs from handling class actions or representing undocumented immigrants or welfare mothers, a whole range of things that were considered politically controversial. And so I and a colleague, with the support of bar leaders in the state, started this entity that would operate without federal funds so that we could pick up those cases. It's important to realize that this was not just a unique Tennessee phenomenon, that this was occurring all over the country because it affected legal aid programs everywhere. And different states responded differently. I was very fortunate to have in this state some leaders in the private bar that really took seriously the idea of equal justice under law. So I and a colleague, Michelle Johnson, who is much younger than I am and very energetic, was a new lawyer at that time, we had resolved that we would go out on our own, but there was really no structure for that, and the bar leaders really provided that by creating this entity. It's a little bit like owning any small business. I mean, somebody's got to own it, and that means you really never turn it off. You deal with it 7 days a week, and you know, you deal with the budget, you deal with all aspects of it. And so it's been a challenge, but it's been very heartening, all the people that have helped make it go. They are low income, but there are also some people who probably are middle income, but because of life circumstances are effectively impoverished. We have handled, over the nearly 15 years that we've been in existence, we've handled issues around nursing home conditions, foster care, access to nutrition services through the food stamp program, the welfare reform program, and in recent years in particular, access to health care. And now we are doing, because of the crisis in our state, that consumes almost all of our resources. Well, TennCare is our state's Medicaid program, and Medicaid, as distinguished from Medicare, which is easy to confuse, is a federally funded but state administered program that serves some poor people. It was very exciting through the first 5 years. It saved lives, it covered a lot of people, it saved money. The program became politicized and it ended up becoming inflationary, and the current governor, who comes from an HMO background, came in 7 years ago and has all but dismantled it. There were these cases that were orphaned then when legal services could not handle them anymore. We took those on. We also filed new cases, and so we represent all 1.1 million TennCare enrollees across the state. And we also have another class action that involves just the kids in TennCare, which is about 640,000 children. It's a third of the children in the state, and it's all of the at-risk children, whether they be socially at risk or perhaps they're more socially privileged, but they are very medically fragile and their parents can't afford their care. So it's a very vulnerable population, and in an earlier life I worked on prison reform, and it's been very gratifying to kind of move upstream and try to intervene in lives at an age when you can bend the curve of a child's life trajectory. So we are trying through that litigation to get the state and its managed care contractors to hold them accountable, to keep faith with their commitments to deliver mental health and other services to these kids. Michelle, my colleague, said years ago, we're the luckiest lawyers in the world because we represent such extraordinary clients. Every once in a while I taunt her with that on days when it doesn't feel so great, but we are really lucky. We represent people who are dealing with, I think, the most painful of experiences of being in this country where you have a loved one, a child, a parent, a spouse who is suffering. There is a treatment that would alleviate their suffering, and you can't provide it for them because they don't have insurance or your insurance won't cover it. That's just particularly a parent and child situation. That's just horrible. And we represent people in those circumstances, and I'm just always touched by their courage and fortitude, and also by their generosity of spirit, that they, will typically say, okay, we can probably fix this with a letter or a phone call. Do you want us to raise it to a level where we make more of an issue of it? It may complicate matters for you, but it would help other people. And they say, I don't want other people to go through what I'm going through, which I think is just really inspiring. I remember hearing years ago, the people who do the most for poor people are other poor people. And I've certainly learned that over 35 years of experience. My own view is being a lawyer is really hard. My father-in-law was an attorney in a small town in Tennessee, a wonderful person. And he described being a lawyer as, you sit behind your desk and someone comes in with this huge burden on their back and turns around and dumps it on your desk and then walks out, and then it's yours. That's what your job is, to solve their problem. I just don't think it's worth it unless it's for a purpose. It's very gratifying to, as we did last week, do an intervention where, for a 10-year-old boy who's got brain cancer and whose surgery was canceled because his insurance was canceled. And you can imagine what the parents were feeling about that. And the oncologist is saying the surgery has to go forward this week, and the hospital is saying, no money, no surgery. And, when you can fix something like that, it's priceless. Paul Farmer, the physician who's the focus of a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains, who deals with AIDS and TB in the third world. He talked about that his experience gave him what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said was the view from below. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who was killed by the Nazis, and who said that he was grateful, this was near the end of his life, that he was grateful, in spite of it all, for having been given the gift of the view from below, that he was privileged. And without comparing myself to either of those people, but only for purposes of saying, I think I'm grateful for the gift from below, the view from below, which I grew up in privileged circumstances, very, very privileged. I mean, my family was affluent, but more than that, I had multiple levels of people caring and loving me. I mean, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, extended family. And I deal with so many people who have almost none of that. And so, we kind of know what we know around us as we grow up. That's the world we know. We don't know anything else. And I've certainly learned that the world is much different, and people's life experiences are very different. And so I think it's brought me closer to understanding the sort of the realities and the truth of the world and human condition.